Tra bod pobl yn dal i ymuno gyda ni, wna I just cychwyn off gan ddeud croeso I chi gyd I ail ddigwyddiad rhithiol Palas Print I ddathlu wythnos siopa llyfrau annibynnol. Tan bore yma, o'n I rioed wedi cynnal digwyddiad rhithiol yn fy mywyd o'r blaen, a sydyn reit, dwi'n gwneud 2 mewn 1 diwrnod. Mae croeso I chi yn y gynulleidfa I gyfrannu yn y chat. Falle dydwch helo wrth panelwyr ni a falle deud o ble ydych chi'n gwylio a gwrando. A hefyd, fe welwch chi, dwi'n siŵr bod chi gyd yn gwybod hyn, mae yna flwch question and answer ar gwaelod y sgrin. Os oes gennych chi gwestiwn y bysach chi'n licio I John ofyn I Mike, neu Mike gofyn I John ar ddiwedd y sgwrs, mae croeso I chi rhoid eich cwestiynau yn fanna. I'd just like to say a very warm welcome to you all to our second ever webinar. And this we've started this morning to celebrate Independent Bookshop Week in a different way because of the current circumstances. You're probably all more familiar with how this Zoom works than I am. So you're all welcome to contribute to the chat at the bottom of the screen. And if you have a specific question that you'd like John to ask Mike, or even Mike to ask John, if you can try and put it in the Q&A box. I'm going to switch myself off now, and but I'm going to leave you in the very capable hands of Mike Parker and John Gower. Croeso John, croeso Mike. Diolch yn fawr am gytuno I wneud hyn.
Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Diolch iawn.
Well, dwi eisiau sôn am y tro cynta nath Mike Parker neu fi'n grac. I'd like to start with the first time Mike Parker made me really, really annoyed. I was living in Newtown, and an Englishman called Mike Parker had the temerity to write in the Rough Guide to Wales a rather scathing account of the church in Newtown, saying it was a bit of an ugly place. And even though the church in Newtown isn't that pretty, I railed against it. And that was the first time I'd ever come across Mike Parker. The next time he made me really annoyed was a different kind of annoyance. Because with the appearance of Real Powys, and also if you think about it, the whole bank of other books that Mike Parker had written, I realised that someone like myself, who prides himself on knowing about Wales, was completely trumped by Mike's knowledge, his loving knowledge of Wales, which he developed not only in the books, but the TV series and all the rest of it. And we could meander through the books displaying his love of maps and his possibly lack of love for politics and by-elections and standing in Ceredigion and so on. But we're here now to talk about this book. As you'll see, I'm laved in the setting sun here. I think On the Red Hill is Mike's best book. I've read it twice, and you can unfurl the book like a rich royal fern, and it's got depth and colour, and I'm a bit concerned about what he's going to do to follow it. So let's start with the title to begin with. The title is part of the complication. It's called On the Red Hill, which has got a nod to Bruce Chatwin's On the Black Hill. But of course, you don't live on the Red Hill, you live on Rhyw Goch. And part of the complexity of the book is wrapped up in the title, Mike.
In what way, sorry?
Well, it's a book with an English title, but a place with a Welsh name. Some of the people who lived in Rhyw Goch before you probably couldn't pronounce it very easily.
Well, no, that's very true. I mean, it is a book about, Reg and George, who are the sort of central couple in the story. Here are Reg and George, a very beautiful couple of men who were together from 1949 to when they died 5 weeks apart in 2011. So they were together 62 years, and they lived here for the last 30 odd years of their lives together. And I must have heard them saying Shrewgoch, but I can't really remember. I think Reg would have given it a good go. George, they would have both given it a good go. But no, I mean, I take the point, and I remember other people have made that point, really, that it's, obviously writing about Wales and sort of, there's a thing today, isn't there, the story in the news today about the danger of anglicising Welsh names, and I hope that I'm not guilty of that. I mean, I can see why people would say that in terms of, but it's the title of a book. It is very much a nod to the Bruce Chatwin book for all kinds of reasons. I mean, I reread On the Black Hill when I was writing On the Red Hill, and it's even more appropriate to my story and my book than I imagined when I first thought of the title, or when it first kind of came to me. So yes, and it fitted in so many ways. It was like the title and like the structure of the book. They both felt like openings that gave me ways into the story and ways into the whole complex textures and colours and rhythms of this part of Wales.
Now, the structure of the book is one of its delights, but it's also part of the challenge to you as an author, because you arrange it in terms of the seasons. So we have the passage of the year, and that's one structure. You also have 4 people. You have George and Reg, the people who preceded you and Peredur, Preds in Rhywgoch. So that's another structure. But the boldest one, I thought, was when I realized that you were also going to make an argument that in some way, each of these 4 people, who just by chance, you could say, lived in the same house, were all in some ways elemental. And when you started to do that, I was thinking, God, can you pull this off? I mean, was one more fiery? Was one more earthy? But part of the joy of the book is to realize that actually that artificial classification really does work in these cases.
Well, thank you for saying that, because I mean, it was something that I worried about. I mean, I knew that this was a book that I was going to write for years and years and years, and there was this massive source material. I had George's diaries, boxes and boxes of diaries and photographs and letters, and Reg's paintings, and so much source material, as well as wanting to write about here and not necessarily just them. And it was a question of how to kind of marshal all of that stuff together. And the day that idea came to me, that we actually did, the 4 of us, quite thoroughly and in ways that were quite thrilling. We did actually, each of us, embody one of the 4 elements. It came to me, it was one of those very rare moments that we don't have many of them in life, when you get a proper light bulb moment, when an idea arrives fully formed and you go, God, I think that's just the answer. I think it's, and it's all there. And I spent 2 days going out walking and testing the idea and thinking of everything that I wanted to try and get into the book, and pushing it, seeing if it fitted in this structure, and that I wasn't going to have to force it. I mean, I think that was my big worry, and I think that's what you're alluding to there. Was I just forcing the issue? But no, it genuinely is true. I mean, Reg, I can picture him here now, just this flighty, mercurial, airy character with a conversation that would just bubble and wash around. And George, this, he was a man of fire. He was daylight to day. He would have been absolutely stark bollock naked somewhere out there. From the crack of dawn this morning until 10 o'clock tonight, he would have been wearing not a stitch of clothing. He'd have a tan like an old desk by now at this time of year. I am water.
And George's energy is something that you remark upon, because, obviously as a young man, he had tons of energy, but even as an older man, he still seemed to do things that he shouldn't be able to do. So he was off on his bike and
perhaps shouldn't do it at all.
To Shropshire.
Yeah. Well, I think there's, I mean, in truth, he was, and there's been some controversy with this one, really, is that, George was, the fieriness of him spilled out in all kinds of ways. He had lots of rows with lots of people over the years, and he was a predator. There's no two ways about it. He was a sexual predator
as well, isn't he? He was a, So,
And his sexuality was fiery and all-consuming. And if you were on the receiving end of it, I think it was pretty overwhelming. And and I'm glad to have started that debate, because I think in queer culture, it's not something we've talked about much. We've seen a lot of it in the kind of hashtag Me Too thing with straight culture, but of course the same thing applies in gay culture. Kevin Spacey, very good example, but George, in his own way, was part of that as well. And I think we need to examine these sort of things, and so. Even in that regard, though, in terms of fitting it into an element, of course, that sexual energy is a fire thing, and that was something that I was really wanting to explore.
One of the reasons we're talking this evening, though, I mean, quite apart from the fact that you have produced this great book, is it's had an extra accolade recently in being listed for the Wainwright Prize. Now, the Wainwright Prize, for anyone who doesn't know, is for the best nature writing. And I bet when you found out about that, it came as maybe some surprise, because you hadn't written a nature book, even though nature threads its way through the narrative.
No, it was a surprise. It was amazing, because of all the things that I write about, I write about all kinds of stuff, but the nature side of it is the one that I feel least confident with, really. This was writing on the Red Hill, and I really wanted to try and express what I felt about the nature here, and try and give, try and paint the picture of what this part of Wales is like, and how I respond to it. But it's always the area of writing that I feel least confident in, and I did so here. I mean, I really enjoyed doing it, but I was, it was lovely to be mentioned. And I have some problems really with nature writing as a genre. It was lovely to get this listing, obviously. But when I looked at the image that the Wainwright Prize people were putting on social media of all the covers of the books that had been listed, and I kind of thought, oh my God, there is a definite look to nature books, and it's something I've seen in meetings at publishers. This whole idea of nature being a sort of the ultimate chill out zone, or just a balm to shattered souls, and there seems to be an awful lot of that around at the moment. I mean, nature writing has exploded into as a genre really in the last few years. As the world has got more and more frazzled, it seems we're diving more and more into things to kind of smooth our frazzled edges, and nature writing is very much part of that. And I feel I have an uneasy relationship with that as an idea, because I think that what that misses is the kind of the blood and the muck and the gore and the death and the sheer bloody mindedness of nature as a thing. Nature doesn't give a toss whether we're in it or not. It absolutely couldn't care less. It can swat us off like that. And so many of these grand nature writers, not just now, this has been the case through history really, are sort of posh men, always men, posh white English men, let's be honest, who sort of stride into nature. They declaim what they see. They feel this sense of kind of ownership over it, and there's no sense of them feeling compromised by it or threatened by it or scared by it. And I want to feel all of those, and I want to express all of those, because that's to me what nature kind of is. So yes, it was a surprise to get, but lovely.
This is a good juncture, therefore, to ask you to read one of those evocations of spring in the book. Okay, so beth dwi'n mynd I wneud, dwi'n mynd I cheto tyma bach felly, a na I ddarllen tyma bach o'r darn falle byddwn ni ddim yn cael amser I gyrraedd, achos ni ffwrna falle prynu amser I ni I ailgysylltu gyda'r mic. So mae hwn yn bwyty y tywydd, testyn fyddech chi'n disgwyl cael. So this is a bit about Welsh weather, which I'll read just to buy some time to reconnect with Rhys Goch and Mike. Wales is a perfect fit for an aquaphile. Water is its foremost element, and never far away, whether squelching beneath your feet, trickling lustily somewhere nearby, or falling in prodigious quantities from the sky above. Its ubiquity stokes a fundamental identity beneath everything, rather than just the crescendo kinetics of male sexuality. Where once, only minutes ago, paucity of opportunity and the thunder of youth combined to steer every alfresco swim into a lecherous quagmire, now, finally, the many other dopamine hits get their turn in the swell. Unlike George, I view the silting up of libido mostly with pleasure and relief. And when I plough up and down my pond now, the thrill is aesthetic, cerebral, and spiritual. Its curative properties are physical, boosting a sluggish circulation and cooling arthritis and gout, and psychological, recentering me in the elemental landscape and dousing the ferment that threatens daily to inundate me. Not that Welsh rain merely falls. It is far too cunning for that. Often it sweeps sideways across the hills in billowing great curtains, or hangs almost static in the air, so that the first inkling of its presence comes when you suddenly realize that you are wet and cannot immediately tell why. And thanks to the meteorological wizard gods of the West, it's not especially unusual for it to rain out of a clear blue sky. I live, it seems, in an infinitely prolific metaphor. Days when the weather closes in and the world is curtained off are some of the best. Familiar shapes mutate into eerie spectres. Views vanish and sound is damped down as surely as if a grey blanket has been laid gently over the land. We are alone and can breathe easy. With the possible exception of a summer heatwave, blanching the fields gold and making sapphires for harebells, extended dry spells never feel quite right. Even the landscape looks amiss. Welsh peaks need sunshafts, wraiths of cloud and distant dark squalls to ramp up the drama. Under blank skies they can appear terribly humdrum and, whisper it, small. If the mosses on tree trunks and rocks have become parched and listless, even on their shaded northern flanks, the unease is palpable. Worst is that Gwynt tried y Meirw in early spring, the icy east wind that has scythed over the feet of the dead, cracking open the dusty soil and leaching colour and contrast from the scene. This is a soft, spongy landscape that urgently needs and usually gets a regular soaking. Prolonged spells of wet weather drove George mad. Rain, he thundered into his diary. Rained all night, rained all day. Gah! In the first couple of years of True Goch, before the cycling began, such days sent him into his library and the far-off worlds of cheap fantasy novels. On the bike, he fashioned a rain cape to help, but even with that, there were sometimes days on end with no let-up, and he would be forced to prowl the house like a caged animal. He worried about losing fitness if a few days slid by with no cycling, so took to the library again, but for weight training, stretches, sit-ups, and press-ups, his new science fiction. Fi'n credu, if we're still not there with Mike, I'll just keep on reading. But I'll preface this a little bit. I'll end up being Mike Parker if this carries on. Is this okay? Is this a good way to just fill time while we wait for Mike? If anyone says yes. Okay, right, okay. So there's a link between what Mike does when he inherits the house and a nature writing we probably would talk about, who's Roger Deakin. Roger Deakin, of course, wrote a lot about wild swimming, and in the book Waterlog, which I think is one of the best modern nature writing books in Britain, about Britain, he first tells us how he swims around the moat of the farm, which was his home, and then he goes off to swim in wild tarns and just goes around Britain swimming in wild water. And one of the changes that Mike and Peredur wrought in the landscape around Rhewgoch, in the immediate hinterland of the house, was they created a swimming pool. There was a patch of marshy land, and then they dammed it and I think excavated it, and it allowed then Mike to swim in all weathers. And there's a sort of intimacy about swimming in water like that, which is unlike the way we normally relate to nature. For instance, in Roger Deakin's book, he's actually in the moat and the swallows come down to the surface just in front of his face. And of course, nature feels safe if you're a human body in the water, because nature doesn't even recognize you as a threat. And therefore, moorhens plash by and so on. And Roger Deakin was taking his cue from a famous short story called The Swimmer by the American writer John Cheever, in which John Cheever writes about a man who tries to get home somewhere in Southern California, and in order to do it, he does it by swimming across all the adjoining or almost adjoining ponds and swimming pools of his neighbours. So this is a bit that Mike Parker wrote about swimming, not only swimming at home, but also finding swimming spots in Wales. Thanks to neighbours, Ordnance Survey, and some well-honed instincts, I truffled out new swimming spots in nearby rivers and lakes. The river below us yielded some fine dunking ponds, while in a rocky chasm just off the lane into town, I found a deep, fast flume that is always exhilarating. When Penny told me that they used to take their daughters swimming in the Mawn pools on top of a nearby hill, I headed up there and into ponds the colour of old-fashioned porter. Peaty water always makes for a distinctive swim, especially in its silky afterglow. My most regular dip was a 20-minute walk away in a stream-fed pool that friends had dug from far end of their meadow. Even in a heatwave, it is piercingly cold, as conifers shield it from the afternoon sun. Floating among the lilies and dragonflies, I soon got ideas and began to plan a pool at Rhewgoch. Outdoor swimming is to me what cycling was to George, not just a form of physical exercise, but a metaphysical necessity. Cold, wild water restores me. The act of submersion, an unbeatable, thrilling synthesis of the flesh and the spirit. The effects are instant and lingering. As a small child, I was terrified of water and would insist on sitting primly in the gallery when my dad took us all to the swimming baths. One day, for some reason, I deigned to give it a go and went from being traumatized by the water to being bewitched by it in the space of a minute. A lifelong obsession was born, one that has only grown with age. Over nearly 20 years of living in Wales, my taste in wild water has radically shifted. Like most Midlanders, I grew up mesmerised by the distant sea, and on first uprooting, followed the centrifugal power that propels us straight to the island's edge, for me, into that tiny granny flat by the coast. After a year of daily beach walks and swims, the counterpull inland kicked in. It was a strange swap, and no contest. The sandblast gales of the shore, the shrouded permadrizzle of the hills. Wind enervates me, makes me jumpy. Mist and rain hunker me in. Though the Western Ocean is only half an hour away and clearly visible from the top of our hills, it can seem like a mirage. I'll sea swim a few times a year and always be glad of it. But my real love now is freshwater, in pools and rivers and excitable shoots My excitable shoot brims now, because I think we've got Mike Parker back after that impromptu reading which filled in the space. Mike?
Right. Sorry about the shaky phone thing, everybody, as well. As it's not half as good as being on the computer, but that was a crash course in the reality of the rural idyll of mid Wales. Is you get one phone call and it knocks your internet out for about the rest of the day. So that's exactly what happened there. So anyway, fingers crossed that the 1 bar of 4G holds out for the next wee while. Right, so this is the spring section, yes, from the so leading up into the time of year that we're sort of in now, really. That's where it finishes. So after 7 springs at Gower, my list of the season's highlights is fattening nicely. There are the headline grabbers, the cascades of snowdrops, daffodils, primroses and bluebells that calibrate the spring from its earliest whispers to its thunderous finale. They all appear, and nowhere lovelier, along the towering banks that line the old Holloway, now the steep and winding lane down to the hamlet below us. There too, in the quickening run-up to summer, come tiny violets and speedwell, celandines and forget-me-nots, saxifrage, sorrel and campion, cowparsley and lady's smock, each taking their bow before sidling from the stage. As I watch Preds break his back to bring the garden to precisely ruffled perfection, I can't help but mull over the flawlessness of these hedged banks, so deep and ancient, yet untouched year on year by human hand. Many of the season's finest moments come, if not unexpectedly, then certainly unannounced. There's the morning when I clomp down the stairs, thick with sleep, and am walloped afresh by the sight of plump pussy willow catkins, backlit by the rising sun. Or the dog walk down to the boggy dingle below, my skittering thoughts suddenly melted by a sunburst of marsh marigolds winking from the gloom. Or the wide, early morning view from a gate on the knuckle of Bryn y Bryn, just before the Gwynt Trydameirw turns and the greenery explodes when the hills growl with latent power. A phrase I've only heard since being in Wales is, "Dew, it's a strong spring," usually said to excuse sudden physical or mental fatigue. The image of this primal force gathering pace around us, sucking us dry of strength and sense, fits perfectly and is one I confidently expect to use regularly as I grow older. Spring is Harfwas Teg am Anrhegau, a fair and beautiful youth bearing gifts, according to Dafydd ap Gwilym, the 14th century mid-Wales bard, of all that is green and lusty. It is the tickle of anticipation. We count down the days to the evening sun first flooding the long passage between the back of the house and the big barn, the old longhouse. That this happens at the spring equinox only deepens our certainty that we live on an omphalos of sacred geometry. We brave the winds to sip an alfresco sundowner and talk about how good it'll be when we can do so without having to muffle up in fleeces and hats. I splash up and down the pond, dreaming of the day when flowers once again titivate its edges and my skin isn't bruised purple by the cold. Some of the finest foreseeable joys are the tiniest. There are no flowers that give me a greater rush than the soon-to-bud blackthorn blossom, tight little snowballs in a crown of black spikes, or the inflorescent buds of the hazels, minuscule flamenco skirts in a shameless pink. At my sister's house one bright March morning, I startled even myself by announcing that I was eager to get home, as it felt like the first day of the year to hang the washing outside. It was a thought I'd never consciously processed, and it came out of nowhere, but once voiced, I realised it was a diamond hard truth. Hauling the laundry basket to the top of the orchard, pinning the clothes out on a line strung between a budding apple tree and a hawthorn, and leaving them to billow in the soft breeze is the purest of pleasures, and you must take those wherever you find them. No two springs are the same. One year, March brought us sulphurous skies and snow that lingered into April, piled up into the hollows and whipped into crusts across the high fields. The following March saw a heat wave, a bright blue, smoky miasma hanging over the hills as we went picnicking and swimming in lakes and rivers. When there is a late cold snap that delays the flowers, one warm spell brings them all out together in a fireworked cascade of colour. The season catches up with itself by the end of May, when spring imperceptibly slides into summer. The leaf canopies snap shut over the bluebells in the woods. Foxgloves and ferns unfurl on the hedge banks, and a shimmer of buttercups rushes across the hay pastures with the speed of a teenager's blush. From my desk, the view of Rongoch vanishes for another 6 months behind the trees, its reassuring presence just a promise. Knock-kneed lambs are now chubby bruisers, barging into their mother's weary teats and chomping everything in their path. The dawn chorus mellows into day-long song as nests are finished and eggs laid, while the scent of warming earth is punctuated with sudden wafts of rose, honeysuckle, and the post-coital musk of hawthorn blossom. There's no more wild garlic for salads. The nettles have become too gritty to eat, and what's left of the rhubarb is drooping. Spring ends on the first day. The first the best drink of the year. Actually, I've got to update that. That's the spring session. I have to update that really because some friends of ours came around and brought us a bottle of actual elderflower gin. So it's gin with elderflowers having been rammed in there for 7 days and left to infuse, and that is even better. I've got to tell you, and I'll be having one of those when we finish this.
Ah, well, I need to send you or share with everybody a recipe for a cocktail which we call Gwaed y Gwan, which would work brilliantly with that if you added a bit of fresh blood orange, maybe some elderflower liqueur, a splash of lime juice, and then topped up with soda. Anyway, that's for later on.
Oh, can't wait.
Yeah,
the water for now.
The one thing about the book is, because obviously you mentioned the treasure trove of stuff that you inherited, the photographs, the documents, and I suppose a sense of responsibility, because they were not only giving you the house, they were giving you their lives, and you were sort of doomed to write in that sense. Then, of course, you were venturing into your own lives because you inherited the house, and you were describing the lives of you and your partner Bredir, and sort of comparing the way in which a gay couplet was the first civil partnership registered in Machynlleth, and you as a couple in a more modern Wales might contrast. But also, in order to write this book, you had to write about yourself in a way that you've been there in other books, you've been there in Real Powers, you've been there even in the rough guides and so on. But this was examination, and I would describe it as self-lacerating forensic examination, because you are very, very hard on yourself in this book. You're at least hard. If honesty is hard, then you're very honest and therefore very hard on yourself.
I felt that I had to be, in truth. I really did feel that, because I was desperate not to fall into self-indulgence, and for it to be a sort of that was the thing that worried me throughout writing it, and I kept I have a small number of friends who are really good readers and very good advice givers, and I kept passing it to them and every time it would always be, give it to me straight, tell me what you think, and please particularly be on the watch out really for any moments where I slide into sort of self-indulgence or self-pity, because there are lots of difficult stuff to write about, and difficult stuff in my own identity and my own history, as well as all the other histories and identities that I'm writing about. So I guess, I had to apply the same harsh rigor really to myself as I did to anybody else. And I think you know, it makes me wince slightly, some of the things that I've confessed to, and stuff about my identity. But I know it's important. I really do. I know there's things about body dysmorphia, things about, you know, to grow up as a queer man in, even now, even in these liberated times, you know, it causes damage. I mean, and talking about nature writing, I think you can see that in queer nature writers, like Derek Jarman is a good case in point. Is often what goes through a lot of queer nature writers is a sort of sense of a brokenness, in truth, you know, and you're not expecting nature to heal you or mend the break, but you are recognizing the sort of, you know, it's a quest really to find that innocence that you lost once puberty started, once adolescence kicked in, and thoughts that were very, very shameful and scarred you for life started to kick in. And using Red and George in that, I mean, Reg was truly the most dazzling conversationalist I've ever met, and I think I ever will meet. He was just the loveliest, kindest, most interested man who could, the skill that I always talk about, and I talk about in the book, but it's one that I still have never met anyone who's equaled it. It was just you could mention somebody once and then 5 years later mention them again, he would remember their entire story. You know, he was that interested in people. And in this day and age, when everyone's on broadcast mode and not very much on receive mode, that was a kind of a real thing. But he was so broken by growing up as a young gay man, and very obviously, you know, quite camp, quite fey, quite light on his feet, airy, as we were talking earlier on. You know, and he never, it went with him to the end, as it often does, you know. So, you know, the honesty, I think, is essential. And if I've gone a little bit too far over the line in terms of being a bit too hard on myself, well, that's a load better than being this side of the line and being a little bit too soft on myself, I think. Yeah,
the other thing, as you were mentioning, Derek Jarman is a nature writer, then I was thinking, if I was to turn behind me now, yeah, so now this is not set up now, okay? So this book, this book, I just pulled off the shelf from there. You can see, right?
Yes.
Okay. Next
it does stand out nicely, actually.
I know.
Oh, what a book! What a book! What a book!
Next to Derek Jarman, and that's not deliberate. It's just, but they've been drawn together as, you know, a sort of free partnership there.
I am so happy to be snuggled up to Derek Jarman on your shelf. I can't tell you how thrilled and slightly excited, if I'm honest, that makes me.
No, that's an odd one. Let's talk about some of the other nature writers, because I know that Richard Jeffries and the mad poet, sadly mad poet, John Clare feature in your writings. You check Thoreau, of course, because as someone who built his own pond, it's almost inevitable that you'd have to refer, you know, Walden Pond. But the person I find has a sort of resonance when I think of nature writing and yourself, just because of the geographical journey, is William Condrey, because Bill Condrey came from, you know, roughly the same patch of the English Midlands, came to Wales, did that thing that we would want so many people to do, which is to respect the place by being interested in it, and then to become knowledgeable in it, and at some point to actually, you know, become expert. And there is a commonality between the way in which the two of you settle into the land and get to know it well.
I was just looking up there, because Bill Condrey is up very close to. I was going to do to you what you just did to me, and pluck Bill Condrey, but I can't quite see him. He's up there somewhere. But yes, yeah, I would be honoured and thrilled to think that I would be thought of in the same breath, really, as Bill Condrey, because I mean he's such a giant of a writer, such a giant of a man, actually, and in this area around Machynlleth. You know, he with R.S. Thomas, of course, when R.S. Thomas was the vicar at Eglwys Fach on the road to Aberystwyth.
And they were friends.
The two. They were big friends, and they set up. They were the inspiration behind the setting up of the bird reserve, the RSPB reserve at Ynys Hir, which is one of the loveliest places around here.
And they were members of the Red Kite Committee. So when they were protecting the red kite. R.S. Thomas and Bill Condry and Colonel Maurice Salmon and Mary Gillam were members of that. And of course, famously, R.S. Thomas and Bill Condry got arrested as spies on a bird watching trip in Spain. So
That's right.
They were close enough to be sort of arrested together, as it were. But Bill Condry, he, the way that he gets to know Ynys Hir, and then the hinterland around it, getting to know the seasons on Cader Idris, is summed up for me in a little diary piece he wrote about April. So, because you were writing about spring now, and he goes out one morning from the house, and he sees an adder. He sees a male adder, slightly sleepy. It's just waking up after the winter, and most people would look at it. But Bill actually went up to it and stroked the adder's head, knowing it was actually torpid and somnolent enough or whatever. And that image, that intimacy of getting to know a poisonous snake and whatever, is there then in the fact that he and his wife Penny could live in a bedroom, and redstarts, very nervous, very secretive, very shy birds, would nest almost inside the bedroom. And that's just a sort of getting to know the place so intimately well that it becomes you, which I think is there in ample measure in your own work.
We've just had, this spring, we've had redstarts nesting in the wall by the kitchen for the first time ever. We've had redstarts at one side of the house, and on the other side, black redstart nesting as well. So it's been a really special, it's been an amazing spring, actually. This spring, I mean, everyone's saying so because of the lockdown, but even here, even in a place that's already quiet by kind of conventional standards, it has been an extraordinarily wonderful nature. Reading that piece there and just thinking how it compares with the spring that we've just kind of gone through, and I suppose the juxtaposition of the spring. But yeah, Bill Condry is such a giant. Penny's still around. I mean, Penny is a big supporter of the Tabernacle in Machynlleth, and she turns up to various events there. And I'll tell you another, somebody who doesn't get mentioned as a nature writer, but from around here, who's a buddy of mine and also a great inspiration as a writer, and that's Niall Griffiths. I mean, he's, Scouser, I'm a sort of Midland, we're both the same age. We've known each other for donkey's years. But I mean, his nature writing absolutely thrills me. I think that he captures and again, it's the kind of it's the muck and the dirt and the death, and the sheer indifference of nature that he kind of captures, which is just so much. It fires me up so much more than reading, sort of rather kind of wincy descriptions that we see too much of these days.
Well, obviously, in Niall Griffiths, you have descriptions of the red-backed shrike, the butcher bird, and its very horrible business of impaling living things on thorns and so on. And I share with you an enthusiasm for Niall Griffiths' nature writing, and it's summed up for me in two little lines, where he's describing a big eagle. I think he's describing a sea eagle going to catch a fish in its talons. And to give a sense of the scale of this sea eagle, he says, and in its talons, the salmon became a stickleback. Bloody brilliant, Niall Griffiths. So yeah. I share the same enthusiasm. The next bit you're going to read for us, Mike, and we're going to rob people of the chance to maybe have as many questions at the end, but I think we need to get this bit in because your piece about parties and social life and the human life of the house is a reminder about a period which feels a long, long time ago now, where loads of people could fetch up at a house and have a party and hug and get it on and all the rest of it. And you've got a section about one of your famous parties. And when this is all over, I've already tried to invite myself to one of them because they're legendary, and I've been hearing about them for many, many years. And just registering the one you had, when you were writing this book, also is almost like a missive from a long ago past.
It absolutely is, and this was my 50th. It wasn't a 50th. We didn't really announce that it was my 50th, but it did. This was 4 years ago, 4 summers ago, And although I'm a midwinter baby, Preds and I share a birthday, and it's dead in the middle of winter. It's just before Christmas. So we've had loads and loads of really miserable, cold birthday parties, and we thought, well, stuff it, we're going to have a summer party and still make it the kind of birthday do. But yeah, reading it now, I mean, so this is this time of year. This is from the fire chapter. So fire, the element of fire, all things sociable and exciting and sexy and drunken and noise and tumult, really. So imagine, if you can, just partying a little bit harder now. Now it's summer. It probably is summer. It's beautiful out there. Let's all go to a virtual party. We've already reclaimed so many corners that were unused by Reg and George. Nibbled out of the field is the pool, and over near the house, a grassy hollow that was once the kitchen midden. We dug out shards of broken crockery and bed springs, fenced it off, built a stone water trough, planted fruit trees, bushes, and the almighty gunnerer, and grandly rechristened it a Bearshlan, the orchard. Alongside, on the plug of rock where the drover's track begins its climb, Preds has landscaped its slopes, planted more fruit in the side soils, and carved a sinuous, secretive path through the beech trees to the Nant, the stream, trickling down from the spring. Another addition was forced on us the Christmas before. After a stormy night, we woke to a double calamity. Poor Taff, our ailing sheepdog, on his last legs, and so too a wartime Nissen hut, ripped free of its moorings and collapsing rustily. We talked about getting rid of it, as it blocked the evening summer sun from the back of the house, but had gradually filled it with so much junk that the decision had been quietly shelved. The storm made it for us, and has bequeathed a sunny and prolific veg plot, a potager, as Preds likes to think of it. There are new indoor spaces too. On the side of the house is another stone barn, and beyond that, slate steps climb to the old granary, now my workspace. This is where I'm sitting now. The book-lined study with its wood burner and wraparound sound is the realisation of a 30-year dream. I so wish that Reg and George could see it. Sometimes when they'd let out every possible room to paying guests, Reg had to sleep on a camp bed in the granary, far less cosy in those days. And in the early years, they'd occasionally sit up there, since it had the best view of all over the hills and Sanctuary Stone. There's also the milking parlour between the big barn and the lawn, which has been re-roofed and turned into Preds' plant nursery, a sensual overload of fronds and flowers, chairs and throws, and another wood burner. Today, for the party, it doubles up as the bar. Even on a warm summer's day, some prefer to stay in the house. The living room is full of older locals chatting, and some playing Scrabble, both English and Welsh versions. While who knows what is going on in the TV parlour opposite, the door has been clamped shut all day by the children, who've taken it over as their den. The kitchen, of course, is never quiet. A hog roast is served, and the day slides into evening. In the bar, people are cackling as they mix rocket-fueled cocktails, while reggae pulses out of my study, a siren call to the smokers. Around the gardens, Chinese lanterns are lit, the main fire too, instantly drawing a crowd to its flickering dance. I wander over the lane to the camping field to round up any stragglers for the cabaret. The waxing moon, 3/4 full, is rising copper and sultry. Spirits are high. By the time I get back, the cabaret is about to kick off in the big barn. People are crammed in, catcalling and hollering with laughter. And the only place I can squeeze in is right by the stage. Aside from the 1966 theme, we didn't call the party my 50th, though it's quickly obvious that word has gone around, as many of those performing have written songs, sketches and poems in my honour. I'm touched by the sentiments, but quietly horrified too. Paranoid that people will think I've deliberately positioned myself centre stage to lap it up, like a syphilitic medieval monarch receiving the hosannas of his court. Some of the contributions, predictably queer and smutty. Nerves prickle through me as I scan the faces of my family, some of our older neighbours, and the parents of youngsters present. But all I see is joy and kindness and faces stretched red by drink and laughter. With the night, all gets blurry. Preds lights the fire in the beacon at the far end of the pool, its flames raised towards the peak of Vrongoch, now a comforting silhouette against the gloaming northern sky. Moths to the flame, a few partygoers drift down. One couple, still in the hot rut of their early courtship, strip off for a swim and then some. We leave them to it. Their only instruction, not to get any bodily fluids in the water, thank you very much. They're not the only ones. The night spawns a few unanticipated blazes of passion, just as it should. Back in the big barn, I spend a few hazy hours on the decks and keep dozens dancing. By the time the music stops, it is milky dawn. Survivors huddle around the fire, talking trash, drinking tea, and fighting sleep. At 7, I am the last man standing. From sponge cake and Scrabble and Gymraeg to starlit narcotic seduction, it has been the day of 100 more bespoke parties, through Goch's infinitely elastic knack. Oh, what a party! I so want a party.
You do make me envious. I think it's almost like a natural cue, though, because we've held our own little Zoom party this evening. I've failed to share the recipes because I clicked the wrong thing, but I will do that. So we'll sort out gin recipes for people as well. Has anyone got a quick question for Mike? If not, I've got one to round off. Who wants to type in a quick question they're burning to ask? If not, I want to ask a hoary old chestnut the journalists ask of writers whenever they come to this part of. So, what are you writing next, Mike? How are you going to follow this?
Well, I am just starting up, really. Well, it's been brewing for a year or so. Getting on the Red Hill out there actually sort of left me a little bit exhausted, if I'm honest. And as kind of we were hinting earlier on, I mean, it's a very, I felt quite exposed when I put it out there because I was putting a lot of me and stuff out there. So I the ideas have percolated around. And actually, the last 4 months of lockdown and COVID-19 and all the rest of it has changed as well the idea that I had and turned it into something slightly different, but broadly the same. It is a kind of follow-up. It's not a follow-up in the sense of it's about this house or it's about Reg and George or anything like that, but it's definitely the next stage in a kind of reverse autobiography, really. So we start here and we're moving into something which is it's kind of about borders and borders within us, and the physical England-Wales border is the topic. And of course, that's become quite a live issue, really, in the last few weeks. I was talking to someone today, actually, my sister, who lives about 50 yards into Wales between Montgomery and Bishop's Castle. And she was saying, can we not just seal the border? Isn't it about time? So, it has become quite a live issue, really, in the last few months. So that's the topic.
It's certainly, in this last period, it's certainly become more pronounced. With people sometimes feeling more safety this side of Offa's Dyke. I certainly feel safer than if I was living in England, and the reduction of the 2-meter rule and so on. Anyway, and that sort of continues some of the other stuff, because you have written about the relationship between the English and the Welsh in the past.
Yes.
And it's not only fertile ground, but it also is very timely, I think.
But it's also to try and physically locate it. I mean, I love that part of the world. I have, the marches, the borderlands. I find them so intriguing because, I mean, I grew up 35 miles the other side of the border. I live kind of 45 miles this side of the border now. So I kind of feel like the border goes right through me in some ways. But that area as well, the kind of neither here nor there-ness of it all, I rather enjoy as well. So I want to explore all of these things, and the history and the politics and the identity and all the stuff that I usually bang on about, really.
Okay. One book I'd recommend, which I've read in the last week, therefore, is The Nightingale Silenced. There's late unpublished writings, which are journals of the Welsh borders, and she was
an amazing writer. I mean, again, a lot of those border writers, they were great nature writers. Houseman, even Mary Webb, Margiad Evans, some of the really their nature passages were just viscerally beautiful.
But they weren't trying to write nature, they were just living
Exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, let me just round off by thanking Palace Print as my favourite bookshop in Wales. Diolch yn fawr iawn i Eirian a Sel am wahodd Mike i ymuno gyda ni am orig heno. Mae'n bleser wastad siarad gyda Mike. It's always a genuine pleasure to speak with Mike, but I say this with genuine writer's envy. You know, in this book, he's written a book where, you know, because I've read it twice now, I've read it twice the second time with increasing envy, because I just like, it's a superb, fabulous book. So of the 21 people listening in participant land, if you haven't read it, please, I hope, use this evening as a springboard to dive into it, much as Mike dives into the pools he has created around the house, and in the same way that he has dived into the country of Wales. And as he's done it, he's given a big splash, but with that, diving into Wales and writing about it, it has been to our mutual benefit, because Mike Parker came among us and has become one of the best writers we have. And
Sean, thank you.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Mike. Diolch i Eirian a Sel.
Wel, diolch i Eirian a Sel yn Palace Print hefyd. Diolch o galon i chi gyd.
A diolch yn fawr iawn i pawb sydd wedi aros gyda ni trwy gydol y sgwrs yna. Gobeithio bod chi wedi mwynhau, a os ydych chi eisiau mwy, mi fydd John Gower wrthi eto nos yfory am 6 o'r gloch yn trafod ei gyfrol ddiweddara fe, The Merinja and Other Stories. Thank you very much everyone for attending and for sticking with this. It's been a great event. Diolch yn fawr iawn, John. Diolch yn fawr, Mike. Welwn i chi cyn bod hir. Okay.
Gobeithio.